We all know water can cook pasta, steam veggies, and make soup, but there's more. With these ingenious tips and tricks, the most humble of ingredients can turn your mediocre dishes into spectacular ones. One of the easiest and simplest tricks you can do with water is to let your sliced and prepped veggies soak in a water bath. This yields crisp and bright-tasting vegetables that will never look or taste like they've been cut well in advance. Slicing veggies leads to lost water content, so you end up with sad, limp vegetables. In the water bath, veggies can rehydrate and even soak up some more, making them extra crispy. This trick is most effective with crunchy vegetables like carrots, radishes, cucumbers, green beans, and onions. Ideally, you want to use the method for salads and other dishes that call for unprocessed, raw veggies. Leave them in the water bath for a couple of hours, preferably overnight. For best results, use cold or ice-cold water, and keep the veggie bath in the refrigerator. Adding pasta water to pasta sauce will seriously upgrade your cooking game. This is a classic Italian technique, and if that's the way it's done in the land of pasta, you should be doing it too. This trick works because pasta water is packed with starch. Although the water is murky and doesn't look appetizing, it'll give your sauces a beautiful texture. This trick works with most pan-made pasta sauces and requires no special skills. As your pasta cooks, simply take out a cup of water and set it aside. When you're ready to assemble the sauce, which usually involves oil or butter among other additions, gradually add your pasta water, mixing continuously until you reach the desired thickness. Once the sauce is ready, add your pasta and mix it all together. The pasta water makes the sauce thinner, but it sets off emulsification, which will make the sauce extra creamy.
Oh my god, they're so good.
Apart from the textural benefit, this sauce will better cling to the pasta, and we all know that more sauce is always welcome. The only thing you should keep in mind is to prepare the pasta al dente, as it will continue to cook in the pan when you swirl it with the sauce. You probably think water and frying oil don't mix, but the following trick, courtesy of America's Test Kitchen, may convince you otherwise. This method involves dunking your flour-coated chicken in water, then letting the water drain off before you toss it in the flour for the second time and leave it to fry in the sizzling oil. The reasoning behind this technique is that by mixing flour and water, you create an almost glue-like coating on the surface of your chicken that helps the second flour coating adhere better, creating a perfectly crispy crust. This technique is best suited for flour dredge breading, but there are no rules about add-ons and seasonings. Feel free to use your favorite recipe, even if it includes cornstarch. The double dip in the flour will give the chicken a substantial, uniform coating. However, in comparison to the classic egg and breadcrumb dredge, this technique yields a thinner, more delicate crust, which is crispier and easier to break through. Typically, desserts include milk, buttermilk, oil, or melted butter. But when it comes to boosting the flavor in your favorite chocolate treats, King Arthur Baking Company senior recipe developer Molly Marzalic-Kelly claims that water may be the secret flavor-boosting ingredient. This method works best with classic chocolate sponges or sheet cakes that combine chocolate or cocoa powder, eggs, flour, fat, sugar, and milk to make a thick chocolate batter. The trick here is to replace the milk with water. Adding water on top of other ingredients won't do. It'll disrupt the ratio of wet and dry ingredients and most likely ruin the cake. But water works better here because it allows the chocolate to shine through, rather than masking it with the fatty flavors you typically get from milk. Water baths aren't unusual in the baking business. The method, also known under the French term bain-marie, typically involves a large water-filled pan that holds smaller pans or ramekins. Your dessert in progress will bake in the smaller pans, and the whole apparatus is sent to the oven. The bain-marie technique is designed for custardy cakes like flans and puddings, but it also works for cheesecake or similar desserts. Because the water surrounds the entire pan, it helps the cake bake evenly, preventing the edges from browning too fast while the center hasn't cooked yet, resulting in uniform color and appearance. The water bath also prevents cakes from drying out.
So dry.
Dry?
The hot air in the oven tends to be too harsh for gentle custard, but as the water bath continually releases steam, the cakes stay moist and juicy, with no cracks on the surface. You can easily assemble a classic water bath at home. Just make sure to use pans with taller edges. And you don't want cast iron here. Rely on regular cake pans and ramekins. Finally, the water in the bath should always be hot, and be careful that none of it ends up in the dessert. The next trick, courtesy of Bon Appetit magazine, uses water to revive a sad-looking loaf of stale bread. This doesn't apply to bread that's already developed moldy patches. Send that one straight to the trash can. This water technique works best with whole loaves or larger pieces that haven't been sliced. You'll have to stick the loaf under running water, ensuring all sides get a generous splash over the crust. If you have just a piece or half of the loaf, make sure that very little water gets inside the bread, but use plenty for the crust. Next, stick your bread in an oven set to approximately 300 degrees degrees Fahrenheit. If you want it faster, you can even go up to 450 degrees. The trick works because the water rehydrates the interior, but most of it turns into steam, leaving the bread soft and moist but not soggy. The heat will also warm the crust and leave it crispy.
Wow. Oh yeah, it's magical.
Leave the bread in the oven for about 10 minutes, but keep an eye on it as the time will depend on the size of your loaf. Adding water to your carefully assembled cobbler might seem counterintuitive, but this water trick will ensure that your crust is shiny and perfectly crisp, so it makes that distinctive crackling sound when you dig into it. A classic cobbler consists of a fruity base, usually made with stone fruit, berries, or apples, but any sturdy fruit that softens during baking is a good option. The fruit is generally topped with dough or a thick batter that creates a biscuity patchwork topping that allows the fruit to break through, creating colorful, juicy puddles. Traditionally, cobbler is assembled and baked as is, but you might want to try this water trick, which was posted on Instagram by Epicurious. First, dust the top with sugar, then douse it with a half cup of hot water just before you put the cobbler in the oven. This trick works best with batter-like crusts. The final result is the crispiest, crunchiest cobbler topping you'll ever have. Some of the most famous international chefs consider scrambled eggs one of the dishes every person should be able to execute perfectly. If you still haven't nailed it, all you have to do is add a splash of water to your lightly whipped eggs. The water helps with creaminess and creates the feather-light texture you want with scrambled eggs. When you're ready to cook your eggs, do it low and slow. High heat will cook your eggs too fast, leaving them overly dry. If you like your poultry with the skin on and want that skin to be perfectly crispy with that beautiful deep golden color, you should douse your bird with hot water. Though it might sound unconventional, this water trick stems from traditional Asian cuisine, and it's the reason why those beautiful Peking ducks have that shiny, almost lacquered skin. For this trick to work, you need to use boiling water. You can use it with smaller pieces of meat or the whole bird. Just make sure the skin is left on. First, you'll have to clean and prep your meat and then carefully pour the boiling water over it. You'll notice that the skin will lightly shrink, tighten, and become almost translucent. Then, pat the pieces with a dry towel, and you're ready to fry or roast. This trick works because all that boiling water renders the fat between the skin and the meat. The skin then browns and gets crispy much faster, resulting in the ultimate version of crispy fried chicken skin. We've talked about stacking your veggies in water to keep them tasting and looking fresh, but there's another benefit that's mainly associated with starchy potatoes. The trick is to take your cleaned and sliced potatoes and throw them into an ice bath. As potatoes are loaded with starch, the cold water will help remove some of it. Though potato starch can be amazing in some recipes, too much can cause your fried or roasted potatoes to be chewy. Without all that starch, you'll end up with a much crispier shell. Also, if you want to prep the potatoes and use them later, the water bath will keep them from browning. You can give your potatoes a shorter water bath, but the technique also works for longer or overnight soaks. This water trick works with both fries and roasted potatoes. Just make sure you drain and dry them after taking them out of the water. Later on, you can roast or fry them and serve them as a side dish, a delicious breakfast item, or a nutritious dinner, ideally paired with your dipping sauce of choice. Deglazing is a familiar term in the culinary world. Essentially, the technique calls for adding liquid to a pan used to cook food. The pan should be left on high heat, and the goal is to introduce liquid so it releases all the caramelized bits left at the bottom. All those browned specks will deepen the final flavor of your dish and can make lip-smacking sauces. Recipes usually suggest using wine or broth to deglaze pans, and although both do the job perfectly well and add tons of additional flavor, it's also worth pointing out that you can use water for the same purpose. Water won't add anything to the overall flavor of the dish, but it's great for scooping up everything from the bottom of the pan. Most of the water will evaporate, so don't worry that it will make your sauces watery. You just want to make sure that the pan is hot and the water is warm. Using water for deglazing is a great option when you want to avoid using alcohol or don't have stock on hand. The purpose behind creating steam in the oven is to add moisture to your bakes and prevent them from drying out. This technique is usually used when baking bread, as the steam helps it get the initial rise. It's not dissimilar from the bain-marie technique we talked about for baking cheesecake and other custardy cakes, where you don't want too much moisture to evaporate, leaving your cake dry and cracked. All you need here is, of course, water to help you introduce steam into the oven, and there are multiple ways to do it. The straightforward method is to pour some boiling water into a pan or a skillet that you'll then place at the bottom of the oven. Due to the heat from the oven, the water will continue to evaporate, slowly hydrating the bakes that are cooking on a rack above the water. You can also introduce steam by adding ice into the lower skillet. It'll quickly evaporate and release steam. Another option is to use the classic spray technique and give your loaf a good all-over spritz of water before it goes into the oven. If you do this, you'll want to open the oven mid-bake and spray more water onto your bread for the best results.